Really living is knowing Jesus, knowing Him personally, allowing Him to use you in any way He might choose. My guest today has been used by God in the highest levels of the government of the United States. Stay with us. We'll be back in a moment.
When you embrace life's journey with a purposeful outlook and a focused perspective, when you have a passion for mission, extreme service, and abundant giving, a dedicated character with relentless strength and courage, when your spirit is at peace, that's really living.
My guest today, Dr. Barry Black, reminds me some of Daniel of old. Barry has given his life to Jesus. Jesus has used him to witness in the highest levels of the government of the United States. His recent biography talks about his life. He has dedicated this biography to scholarships at Oakwood College, a college from where he graduated. We'll find out today how God has chosen to use him to witness to people in the military, in government circles. What is your work right now?
I am the 62nd chaplain of the United States Senate, and it is my responsibility to be a pastor for 100 senators and their families and approximately 7,000 other people who make up the Senate side of Capitol Hill.
I had no idea we're talking about 7,000. That's the number of people that work with the Senate?
That is correct. It's also the number of people who did not bow their knee to Baal, as you remember in 1 Kings chapter 19. It's a wonderful opportunity to make a difference by being a spiritual fitness coach for the members of what some have called the most exclusive club in the world.
Barry, in this book, The Story of Your Life, you say there's a bottom line testimony and a challenge. You said, if God can bring me.
Well, if God could bring me from the hood to the hill, if he could bring me from awful to awesome, he can do that for anyone.
I read in here in the first few pages about what you just referred to, and you talk about rats and roaches in your house.
Anyone who's lived in a public housing project is probably aware of the fact that there are uninvited pets, and there were rodents and there were roaches. There was also domestic violence that you could see out in the open as people caught in airtight cycles of poverty acted out their frustration and their anguish. There were prostitutes on the corner. There were drug addicts. There were deviant adults. So it was quite an environment of pathology and anguish that I grew up in.
Barry, you've convinced me already that there's quite a spectrum here. The place where you started is far different from the place where you minister now. How has this happened? How has it been that you've been able to travel this kind of a journey?
I believe that God has a plan for each of our lives. Jeremiah chapter 29, verse 11, talks about that plan, a plan to prosper us. God desires to bring us to a desired end. He wants to help us, not to hurt us. I believe that God orchestrated a wonderful plan for my life to do what Ephesians 3:20 talks about, immeasurably, abundantly, above all that I could ask or imagine. I was about 8 years of age when my mother came home with a record from Peter Marshall. I didn't know who Peter Marshall was, but I played that record until I had memorized the sermons on it. Peter Marshall was the 56th chaplain of the United States Senate. Now imagine an 8-year-old who has enough of a spiritual sensitivity that he would play a sermon record over and over again. I think God, probably around that time, decided to do something special. And he set in motion a sequence of events that permitted me to eventually accept the baton from one of Marshall's successors. I had no idea what a Senate chaplain was at that time. I could not have told you who Peter Marshall was, but I knew there was a lyrical beauty to the message, the messages on that record. And he was the 56th chaplain of the United States Senate. God brought me to be the 62nd chaplain of the United States Senate. So he had a plan that was far greater than anything that I could imagine.
If you had followed along with your friends, you'd have ended up in a different place.